So that was really exciting. I'm going to try and keep up that energy level, and I'm hopefully not going to blow it. So I'm Jay Harmer. I'm one of the directors with ISES Vancouver, for those who do know me. I host ISES Hangouts about twice a month. It's a live online panel with event professionals, and we take apart various topics in the event industry. It's a lot of fun. You should check it out. And so I've been lucky enough to be invited to come and host tonight. So we've got a really great opportunity to learn from the people who are behind some of the biggest events in Western Canada. And so this is a really unique and rare opportunity to get them all in one place and pick their brains. So I hope that the questions we put together tonight are going to help educate and enlighten you as to who they are as people and what happens inside their brains and what helps them drive and make these seemingly Herculean and impossible things come together and happen. It's a particular treat for me to be up here, as I started in the event industry with one of our guests in 2001 as a volunteer, and I actually found my accreditation as a volunteer. So I actually have proof that I worked for John, answering his phones and sorting things in his office. And so this is a really unique pleasure for me, because I also get to put him in the hot seat. So this is going to be a good time. So the guests that we have, they're leaders, they're innovators. They have their finger on the pulse of the crowds, on what is happening in event management with the government, with sponsorship, in this crazy myriad of complexity that is the large event realm. They understand the nuances of the way that governments work with their promotional dollars, whether it be provincial, whether it be municipal or federal. In addition, they understand how ad agencies spend their money and make their decisions. And so they are a very creative, brave, and tenacious bunch of people. So I'm really looking forward to tonight and getting to host this. So the schedule, what we're going to do is, this is the intro part that we're in the middle of. I am now going to introduce our panel, and I'm going to go through their bios as fast as I can so we can get straight into questions. They are crazy long. I'm going to miss stuff. There are piles of awards and accolades and signature events these guys do. So I encourage you to go look them up after today and go check out the kind of work that they do, because it's exciting and it's cool. So then we're going to do about 40 minutes of curated questions, and we're going to dig into them as people and get inside their brains and look around and get them to share with us about what makes them tick. And then if your minds are not completely blown by that point, we're going to leave it to you guys to ask questions. So we got about 15 minutes left after that, and so if you guys want to ask questions, you can. If you don't, I have more, and we can keep going with my agenda. So at the end, so if you have questions, please save them till the end. Does anybody have questions already? Does anybody, show of hands? Anybody ready to ask questions now? Okay, good, because I want that to be me. So we are going to focus on them as leaders, as people, their methods, how they build their teams, and if there's time, we're going to talk a little bit of State of the Union, because I very much want to hear sort of how they see the event industry developing, particularly in regards to technology, because this is very fascinating for me, and I hope also to you. So I'm going to say that a bunch of times. It's interesting for me, and I hope to entertain you in the process. So the rules, there are none. We're hoping that most answers come in under 3 minutes, but really it's a bare knuckle brawl, so it's a free-for-all. I'm going to ask direct questions to each panelist, but of course they are welcome to contribute at any point, and that includes cutting me off. So I've already asked you if anyone's got questions, so let's bring our panel up. So I want to start with Paul Runnals. He is standing right over there, and his background is in large-scale event management and international experience, and a career spanning 25 years. His primary event domain is major international festivals, concert tours, televised concert events, theatrical shows, and extraordinary special events. His signature events list includes Lilith Fair, concert tours with Sarah McLachlan, Avril Lavigne, Sum 41, the Stereophonics, and Dido. In Excess, Prince, Blue Man Group, Nelly Furtado, and the Tragically Hip. And he founded brand.LIVE in 2008. His current major signature event is, of course, Live at Squamish, which is now known as the Squamish Valley Music Festival, which has an amazing lineup, which they have just recently announced. Which includes Eminem, Arcade Fire, and Bruno Mars, which is going to be an amazing show. So he also does this other little thing called the Celebration of Light Fireworks Festival, which maybe some of you have heard of. I think about 150,000 people raid the West End to see that thing. And he's also been involved with the Olympics and, of course, Grey Cup. So his company, you can just come up anytime you like. I'm just going to talk. So he's a founder and a major partner of brand.LIVE, which is a leading event management company. This is my chair. You may have this one. With a diverse portfolio of award-winning events, including major concerts, festivals, corporate and celebrity galas, and award shows and VIP functions. Next up is John Donnelly. And I believe his first major event was the 1986 Saskatchewan Pavilion, but I could be mistaken. I may be close. All right. He also has 2 gold records with his band, Queen City Kids. He is a man of many stripes. His event domain, as well as large-scale music festivals and events. His signature events list is rather long. Surrey Fusion Festival. You don't have 3. Oh, but I'd love to. I got to work on a bunch of these. This is exciting for me. Western Canadian Music Awards, 10 years. Surrey Canada Day, 10 years. Surrey 2010 celebration site during the 2010 Olympics, which attracted 275,000 people. The 2009 World Police and Fire Games. Molson Canadian Snow Jam, which was the most successful action sports and music festival with attendance reaching over 350,000 people. And also where John really helped mold me into the production manager that I am today. And New Music West, of course, which is what my past is from, which was a huge industry music festival which ran for many, many years and was a great developmental experience for many upcoming artists in town. His awards include 2013 Best Festival, prestigious International Gala Awards in Nashville at the TSE for the Surrey Fusion Festival, which is amazing. BC's Best Entertainment Production, nationally with a Star Award for Entertainment Event of the Year, and internationally with Most Outstanding Spectacle Event Award at the 2009 International Gala Awards in New Orleans. And most recently, secured and operated the live venue for Live Nation's Mumford & Sons Outdoor Concert in Surrey. And he is the founder and principal of Donnelly & Associates. Woo! David Nichols is up next, and he is another lifer. 20 years experience in the event industries, clients such as Coca-Cola, Nintendo, Nestle, Bell, and the BC government. His event domain specializing in experiential advertising events, non-traditional services, and approaches. Signature events, Olympic programs for the 2010 Games, bringing events for sponsorship and activation, and the Olympic torch relay to a new level never seen before in Canada. Additionally, he's a volunteer co-chair and founder of Kids Sport Vancouver and is a member of the sponsorship committee for BC Children's Hospital Foundation. So there is some altruism baked in there as well. His awards include, he was awarded one of top Vancouver's 40 under 40. He was given the Canadian Young Entrepreneur of the Year, and he was a finalist for the Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year as well. His company Inventa was founded in 1996. Is that right? Holy jumping!
Yes, it is.
It is one of the leading. One of the leading experiential agencies in Canada, and his offices in Vancouver and Toronto with over 50 full-time staff and over 1,000 people per year to bring client brands to life. He's won numerous marketing awards and has been shortlisted as one of the best employers to work for in BC, which is high praise. In 2011, Inventa won an International Globe Award for Best Event of Experiential Marketing Campaign in the World for work done with Richmond Center. So that is David. Next up is Ken Kristoffersen, and I'm going to try and make sure I say this right. He is the current VP membership and the chair-elect for the Canadian affiliate of the International Special Events Society. He's held appointments to the National Advisory Panel for Canadian Events Perspective and the International Advisory Board for Special Events Magazine. He's a chapter president and was a founder of ISES Calgary. He sat in the International Relations and International Education Committees for ISES, as well as the National Advisory Panel. Let me see, his event domain. He does work with the Stampede and large-scale corporate events for oil and gas, so he has a very rich background in understanding corporate protocol and the complexities therein. Some of his key work is in inspiring teams and which reflect the brand that they are looking to support. And one of his, we'll call them signature powers, is to personalize experience for large shows, which I'm definitely going to ask you about later on. And he works also in the incentive market as well. So his awards include selected Canadian Event Producer of the Year twice. speaker at national and international conferences, and in 2008, he was honored with the Canadian Spirit of the Industry Award, which is a Lifetime Achievement Award, for his contributions as an industry advocate over the past decade. So that is pretty high praise.
My career was over.
That sounds good. I have never heard that bio in my life before.
Nice.
So
Well, that's
that was
good.
like, wow.
I made it up last night. I hope you liked it.
I'm like,
So additionally, his company
Stampede.
is, no, you don't do any Stampede work?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So he is he's the president and creative director for Pop Kollaborative, and he has both Western and Eastern Canadian offices. And so we are now into questions, and if I can ever find them. So now I'd like to ask you all to make sure that your phones are on stun, and so that we don't get interrupted, and that includes you guys. I assume you've turned them all off. Let me see. Oh, no, wait, this is all my preliminary stuff. Good news. So now, so I want to ask you guys a question first, actually. So these gentlemen work in a realm which is very, very public. So how many people have worked for one of these guys directly? Okay, and how many of you have worked on one of their, keep your hands up, don't get lazy. How many of you have worked for a supplier on one of their event sites? Worked along with them, okay? And how many of you have attended one of their events? And how many of you have seen their event promotional material somewhere out in the world? Okay, so is that everybody in the room? So I think this is amazing because we're looking at an incredible level of cultural reach that we see just with you four gentlemen here. So this is a really grand opportunity. So beyond that, I want to start with David. David, I have a question for you.
Okay,
You ready?
I'm ready.
Okay.
Why am I the only one up here with the beer? I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah, it's weird. And how's that working for you?
It's working good when I have a sip after.
Okay.
Question.
Good. Does anybody else need a beer? Are you guys good? You comfy? Good. Okay. All right. So, David, what moment in an event gives you the most joy? What is the point when you're like, man, this feels amazing. I've totally nailed this.
Well, for us, it's probably when the client shakes your hand and goes, "This event is amazing." With Inventa, we don't typically do major consumer events, meaning that those events are maybe for consumers, but they're not for the sake of the consumer. They're for the sake of the client. So when my clients come to us and say, you know, you've really nailed our target market, they're really getting the message, and I love to see how engaged they are with the brands that we're bringing to life. Yeah. I think that's the big win. But you know, where it often comes from is if you're just walking around and seeing people truly engaging with a brand, and you know, when you're talking about consumer packaged goods brand, Coca-Cola, Nestle, you know, it's not always easy for people to say, I really want to be part of that brand. So when you can do something like specifically with the Olympics for Coca-Cola, people are engaging with the brand and they come out of there going, wow, I never knew Coke was doing all this other good stuff in the world. I actually had some people come through our pavilion for the Coke Pavilion live site at the Olympics and walk away saying, you know what, it changed my perception of what Coke is. Really? By walking through this. I didn't realize how environmentally conscious they were. I didn't realize what they were doing to try to change the industry as far as packaging. And so, you know, that the client's really happy, but when consumers can come up to you and say, this changed how I feel about the brand, then that's a big win for us.
That's great. So it's really like, it's not only just the client, it's also watching the minds of the people that you're blowing. Like they're just like, holy jumping. That person really understands what we're trying to do, and it's really connecting with those people.
Yeah, definitely.
Nice. John, what is your best gut instinct? What is the thing that comes from inside you when you go, oh, it's got to be this?
I don't know. I mean, for me, when you're building a show, you're trying to find what's going to work for that event. So you have to look at a lot of different elements. Like you have to go with your gut, mainly when it comes to talent buying. When it comes to designing what the flow of the show is going to be, and how are you going to engage the people? How are you going to hold them? How are you going to shift as the crowd's going to shift through the day? In our case, we do a lot of sort of big family events. So you've got families in the daytime, but you got to shift it to rock at night because you need to, at the end of the day, deliver that big payoff. Mm-hmm. You know, the payoff is the show has to rock. The people have to get what they came for and leave elated, feeling fantastic, right? So I think, you know, in terms of artists and contemporary talent, a lot of times it is gut you have to look at. There's certain things you can track, attendance, you can look at last shows, you can try and look at how many tickets they've sold or other things to really analyze what the artist is, but for the most part, it's going to come down to your gut feel of, does this act go with that act?
Right.
Does the combination of these three acts equal something that's bigger than just the band? So I think that's what you have to go with your gut a lot of times is when you're building what that show is going to be.
So it's so you'd say it's involved definitely with like the artistic level with how you're structuring the show and you're structuring the town. That is you're sort of like emotionally feeling your way through that.
I think so, you know. And then the other thing is building the budget. You know, you got to go with your gut on the budget too. Like, how big can you build it? How much are you really going to sell it? You know, a lot of times, really, with the event, it really always does boil down to the budget.
Yeah.
You know, at the end of the day, when you're dreaming up, you can come up with great ideas or whatever, but really, you have to make sure that it's going to work, and that you can be here, that your client's going to be happy, that it's, you know, it's going to work on all levels.
Nice. Great. Thank you. All right, Paul, you're up next. So you have been, I mean, I loved reading off your legacy event list. It's fun for all of you, really. So when you were an earlier stage entrepreneur, when you were trying to get your business off the ground as Quattro, I believe it was called.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What do you think was the smartest decision that you made developing your budding business that allowed you to grow it into what you have today? It doesn't have to be one thing. You can give me a bunch of things.
Well, I mean, a couple of things happened. We started Quattro, my wife and I, so she probably gets part of the credit here, but
She's not here, it's fine. We won't tell her.
we started it as to target event production, large-scale event production stuff that was going on around the city at the time. So this is back in the early 1990s. And I was working with Sean Williamson, who's since gone on to become a very successul chairman of Bright Light Pictures in the film industry. So Quattro was originally my wife and I and Sean and his wife. We came together, formed Quattro, and we decided we were going to take over the event business. I then got hired brought on to build and create the original Lilith Fair, and he got drawn into the film industry. And so as partners in the space of about a year, we kind of did this.
Yeah.
At which point we went, wait a minute. I'm on something really good over here, and you're on something really good over there, so let's call it for what it is, and we had a very amicable parting. But and then I spent 15 years on the road. So, but you know, anchoring a lot of that road time were still a series of signature events that were going on in the city. But the profile of some of the celebrity pieces that we were doing obviously has been valuable in opening doors and in leveraging some of those opportunities to get meetings that you might otherwise not have gotten. So I mean, it's hard to say in hindsight,
Sure.
but I mean, I think we just kind of set down a path and stuck to it, and here we are many years later.
So perseverance, showing up every day.
Absolutely.
That was I think that's a great lesson for anybody.
Absolutely.
Nice. Thank you. Ken,
Uh-oh.
you ready?
Yep.
When are you at your best?
Oh, wow. Thank God no one from my team is here. I am at my best when we work with clients and stakeholders that give us the flexibility and time to deliver our best product. That, I think, as an industry, we're all under the crunch sometimes, and I think it's educating the clients to let them know that they're not getting the best thing is a struggle. But that's definitely when I'm at my best, when we can process things and go back and do a proper discovery process and that.
Right. So when you so really it's when you have sort of maximized your potential as a client manager is where you would say that is when you can perform the best work.
Yes.
Nice. Fantastic. That's great. Thank you. David?
Yeah, I think time is underrated by clients.
You know, they just don't know what passes. That's all. They just think the event happens now.
Yeah, or 8 weeks from now, and that's lots of time.
Sure is.
But I agree. I think if you've got the time to do it right, it's tough when you're trying to get decisions made and you put a deadline in front of them and say, you need to give us an answer by this time, otherwise it affects this. They just think, oh, well, you can just throw more money at it. Well, more money, it might help, but it's not going to solve the problem. Like, time is key, because certain things take a certain amount of time to get produced. And so, yeah, we struggle with that all the time.
And you can drive it through with more money, but what you ultimately get is a substandard product.
Yeah, it's never as good.
And I think that's part of an evolution of the industry. I think events now are so much more of a communication tool than they ever were before in the past. And if we're creating them as communication tools, we need to have time to do the proper discovery process and make sure there's strategy behind the events, because they're not inexpensive. And we need to be able to make sure that every element of the event reflects back to their messaging. And when you hit it right, you have a client for long term. And if you don't, it can still be a great event. It just wasn't the best financial investment they could make. Right. And we own that, so.
And then if it's in the public space, because of social media's veracity and the love of outrage, everyone will know if something has happened that has made people unhappy. And
it's live theater.
It's so terrifyingly dangerous. So thank you. That is a great answer.
I think the other key thing to realize is you get to a point where money won't do it. You just have to say, it's not going to happen. I don't care how much money you throw in. And if you have a client that says, oh, I'll throw in more money, but often they say, oh, I can't make that decision, and I have no more budget, and you need to work within these timelines. So for us as event producers, to be able to step back and say, well, then that is greatly going to affect what you've given us the mandate to do, and have the courage to say, you've now changed the scope. You've changed the scope of what you wanted to do because you haven't given us the time, and you're going to get a substandard no matter how much money you can or often cannot put into it.
And I think that's a really good point to address, which is that it's important to have boundaries, and that those things are really challenging when you have to say no to a client or when you have to walk away, like when you hit those points. So I'd like to move on to my next question. Is that all right? Does anybody else have anything? No? Okay. Actually, I'm going to, David, this one's for you. I'm going to keep going with you.
Okay.
Whose leadership inspires you or has inspired you in the past?
There's a few different people that I look to that have been leaders that have inspired me. And one of which, it's ironic you asked this, because he just reached out to me today, and he was a coach that I had. I used to play a high level of water polo, and this guy coached me from age of about 15 till into my mid-20s. And he's a French guy. He couldn't speak any English. He'd swear at us because that was the only English he knew, and he wouldn't let us get away with anything. But he taught us about discipline. He taught us about respect and being there to support others. And so that leadership it's really helped form, my brother and I, who I own Inventa with my twin brother, and we both played water polo. So he really helped us form what we think is the core of what we try to create within our company. And then, so that'd be the first one. But then often it's, if you give your team the opportunity to lead, and you give them the space to do that, and then they do stuff that you're like, wow, never thought about that. That's totally motivating. And that it might come to another question later, but that's what continues to keep me going, is looking to the people I surround myself with and know I can learn from them, and they're going to do things better than me. And I need to stop and say, okay, let's hear what they're going to say, because chances are it's going to make Inventa way better.
Nice. So I do have questions about team. Did you read my notes? Is that?
Foreshadowing.
Okay. That's great. I think that's really inspiring. That not only can you say that this coach that you had in your past inspires you as a leader, but also that you can look to your team and they can help inspire you that way. That is fantastic. John, I have a question for you now. And I actually hinted at this when we were out on the floor. When we do events, they are exhausting. We burn ourselves out like crazy, and I know everybody knows this. That last week is the most ridiculous, exhausting experience that you can ever really live through. At least that's what I found. How do you recover? How do you recharge yourself when like you get home and you're all wired and then you pass out and you wake up the next day and you get that like postpartum malaise and you're like, oh, the adrenaline's gone. How do you recharge yourself?
Well, I mean, I think it does, we thrive on adrenaline. You know, like I think you do get that adrenaline buzz from building to the event, all the thought that goes into it. In many cases, it's months or a year of planning that leads to it. So there's pressure that builds up from that. So when you actually get to the moment where, you know, you're about to call, gates are open and the people are coming in and there's lineups of people outside and there's all kinds of stuff going on, it's a really exciting moment. Then you get actually to where the stage happens and the crowd is there and you hit, you know, that sort of great high that, you know, I know I sort of live for it. I mean, I find that moment and it really is what fuels me, and that can keep you going through those late night teardowns. If you're still, you got to keep going till 5 in the morning, whatever. I know that what I have to do in our case with our team is I have to sort of lead people through that. I have to be the guy who has the energy, who doesn't let go, that, you know, I'll stay to the end a lot of times to make it happen. So I do need a recovery curve when you get out of it.
Absolutely.
You get this, but it doesn't happen the next day. I've always got to show up the next day and be the first guy back to make sure the cleanup's happening and sort of see that through. So my recovery doesn't actually kick in till the day after. And a lot of times it's, you know, especially if the event went really well, there's a little bit of calm elation that, you know, that's sort of enough for me.
Really? So entirely going, that event was amazing? Okay, I'm good. Let's do this again.
Yeah, and then you have to get, you know, so often too, then there's other events that are coming up. You're overlapping, so you're getting that one done, but you're already on to the next one.
Yeah. So it's just
really
the energy and the momentum of the next one is just like, all right, I'm going.
You got to be right back. Now, you know, I'm finding, you know, I'm
I
a
was
little
hoping
older,
there
so
was going to be like some chanting and candles and maybe sacrificing a goat or something, but this
I'm
is
purely going on the energy of the buzz of the show and the excitement from the show, and then recover from that, get over it as quick as you can, recharge, and back at it the next day.
Nice, nice. Does anybody have any weird rituals for sort of putting themselves back together? No? There's a bottle of scotch, bottle of Oban that gets destroyed the next night? No? All right.
I think it's more sort of mental for me, and I think this is relevant to all the ISES members in here, and especially to the board members, but I'm exhausted, I'm tired, all those things, get that adrenaline rush. But at the end of the day, you come back to work and it's there again. And I think you run the risk of starting to be disgruntled or not so fond of what you're doing. So for me, it's in our business plan. It's why do I do this for a living? And I look at that because it helps remind me why I do this for the living or for a living. And I think the same thing can be said for ISES board members as well, that you need to have something to latch onto at 2 in the morning when you're doing your other job, the one that doesn't pay you, and going through those challenges. So it's just reminding ourselves what we get out of it, other than an income.
Nice. I think that is a fantastic answer. Thank you, gentlemen. Paul? What do you think is the greatest misconception about you that people have?
Wow. Wow, that's an interesting one. The greatest misconception.
Yeah, that people have about Paul Runnals.
I've been told I'm grumpy.
What? I hear that all the time. It can't be
and I just don't think that's true.
No,
I think you're catching me on the wrong day. Greatest misconception. That's a really interesting one. I don't generally hear those. So I think you'd probably be better asking some of the people in the room
Okay,
what they know.
So we'll go with grumpy then?
You know, I think it's maybe not grumpy. Maybe it's difficult to approach is maybe a more descriptive
and that
manner.
is totally not the case.
And that is not the case, but I'm probably much like everybody else in this industry. When you get the blinders on and you're focused on getting to a goal, whether that be the delivery of an event or the pitch or the whatever, you know, I certainly get into that space where I'm extremely focused, and,
Yeah.
and you know, we've all seen it, and we all do it. So I mean, I think there's some truth in that, but
Yeah.
but outside of that, I would argue it not
Yeah.
to be true.
Nice. I think that's a great answer. Thank you.
Paul's incredibly focused when he's working.
Yeah.
It's just, this is the task, I'm going to get it done, and it doesn't matter what else is going on, and he just is so focused. It's quite amazing to watch, actually. We've worked a number of times in a number of programs, and he's a machine.
I've walked right past him and not even noticed.
Nice.
him.
Yeah,
Nice.
and you know, you're just like, nope, you just let him walk.
He's got
doing
he's
something
got
way
stuff
more
to do.
important than I'm doing.
Yeah.
Catch up with you later.
Excellent. All right. Well, then, David, I'm going to throw another question to you. You do. I mean, when I was doing my research, I was told that you have this amazing ability to generate these really unconventional executions for your clients. Where do they come from? Where do you get these from? Is it a magic 8-ball? Is it scrying? Do you have some kind of reflecting pool? Where do you get these ideas?
Yeah, you know what? Somebody asked me this earlier too. So I've had some time to prep for this question.
Excellent.
Actually,
That actually makes me uncomfortable. I'd much rather have you guys in the hot seat where you're like, I don't know.
I think it's interesting because my company's been around for about 18 years. So clearly, I was very young when I started, and so I had hair back then. No, I think inspiration changes as your life moves on, and if I'm totally honest, a lot of my inspiration right now comes from my kids.
Nice.
And it's really cool to be working with brands and clients that my family is the target market. So every day, playing with Lego with my kids, dropping them off at school is a source of inspiration. So I think that I've been able to, my career has followed my life quite well. But I don't always know where they come from. But it's a matter of being aware of the things around you during life and not just kind of coasting through it. But, you know, my wife often says to me, okay, can you just focus? Why don't we just keep going here? Because I'm like kind of a little ADHD, right? I'm distracted by stuff. And I'll be like,
thinking
hey,
about
look
Lego.
at that. That's really cool. And I'm texting my brother, and my wife's like, okay, come on. But I think it really is observing what's around you. And a lot of that is with my kids right now, which is, it's awesome too.
Nice. Fantastic. Thank you. Ken, back to you. So I mentioned earlier that I was going to come back and ask you about keeping huge events personal. And so this to me sounds like an incredibly challenging feat where you have the methods where you take a large execution for a client and you help them make it about the individuals who are participating. What are the rules that you follow that allow you to keep, like, what do you not compromise? How do you keep it personal for these people?
I'd like to take a pass on that question, please.
Really?
It goes back a little bit to my other answer. I believe that events are just a medium for communication. So it doesn't matter whether you're doing weddings, conferences, fundraisers, corporate events. You're all trying to communicate a message. Quite often, it speaks in a different language. And the number one step is trying to figure out what that personal message is that the client, if it's social or even corporate, understanding their brand. I think far too often people go in to do a corporate event and they don't know anything about the corporation. They don't look at annual reports. They don't look at stuff online and see what they're passionate about. And then we break down every single element of the event and use it to communicate that.
Nice. Nice. That is fantastic.
Not flowery, sorry.
No, I think that's a magnificent answer, is that you're actually paying attention to the attendees and making sure that they understand what's going on. And I think this goes back to what David said earlier about how one of the things that where the moment of joy for him is when he really connects the brand with the person who's attending. So I think that's a marvelous answer. Fantastic. Thank you. Paul, let me get back to you for this one. So making a festival into a thing, saying that, like, we're going to have this big party. There are about 1 million people who are just lining up to tell you that you can't. There are landowners, there are neighborhood associations, there are municipalities, there is provincial oversight, there are all these groups, the police. Everybody can't wait to tell you no. How do you take all of that resistance and use it to power you to drive through that?
Yes, you're correct on the resistance. I mean, the truth be told, as a great example of the process, but also the challenges that we've been dealing with have been realized through the growth of the Squamish Music Festival, which, of course, back when it started in 2010, and we drew 6,000 people, nobody really made much of a fuss about. But this year, with 35,000 people, it's a whole different story. So, you know, the short answer, it's not even that short. I think a lot of it goes back to the integrity and to the development of relationships. And to, you know, it's a small industry at the end of the day. It doesn't take much to be able to reference check anybody. And in particular, when you start dealing with municipalities or with civic officials or emergency services or any of these key stakeholder groups, you know, you step wrong once and everybody knows about it. So you know, it's time invested in building relationships, but it's also a great deal of time committed to following through with pledges that you make along the way,
Right.
and earning the trust one by one, and slowly but surely, you know, winning over the dissidents, or just simply having a body of work that you can point to and go, we've done all these things before.
Did it right before.
We have all these sort of people that can speak on behalf of the process that we've done, or the promises we've made and how we've lived up to those promises. And therefore, at a certain point, you have to give us a chance and let us prove that same thing to you. And that's a large part of what we've been doing.
So that inevitable. So you swing your credibility like a sledgehammer then. When it comes down to people saying like, no, I'm just going to say no because I'm a bureaucrat and no, you will then start trying to find allies to help break through that. And
we have allies. That's the thing. We've been lucky because we've been afforded these opportunities to do some pretty marquee things and push the needle on a few fronts where we can go in and say, we did this over here, we did this over here, and we did this over here. And in every case, you can call these people and talk to them and ask them about the experience.
You did right by them.
And we lived up to our commitments, and the event was well run, it was well thought out, and it wasn't, you know, Armageddon. So give us a chance, right?
Nice, fantastic. And so this is very similar in nature to the previous answer that we talked about, which is the persistence, and that it's showing up every day. And
it is a lot about persistence. It is a lot about persistence and about relationship building, for sure.
Nice, excellent, thank you. John, I want to come back to you. And I love asking you questions like this. You do a lot of sponsorship work, and you work a lot, especially when I first came on board, did like Molson, Coors, perhaps some other companies that made carcinogenic sticks that you light on fire and inhale, but we won't talk about that. So, but major brand dollars. Is outside of those people that you already have relationships with, do you ever like wake up in the middle of the night and go like, oh my God, I got a great idea for a GM. I got to call those guys. Like, is that something that happens in your realm?
I think it used to sort of more so. Now I wake up in the middle of the night and I've got a great idea for a new song.
Nice.
And I've got to, you know, sort of go in a little different direction. But I mean,
sounds healthier.
Sponsorship is, you know, I mean, there was that day when, you know, Neil Young wrote, you know, this Bud's for, or this note's for you, and he was sort of against sponsorship. And there was that really, in the 90s, there was sort of a real transition as sponsorship became so important, and especially with the cost of events. And I mean, the sponsors won, you know, at the end of the day. And so now, really, events are a vehicle for sponsors to achieve certain things. So I think it's no longer, though, about us phoning a sponsor and saying, hey, we've got this event, and we'd like you to come and, you know, do something at our event. I think the sponsors prefer you to go in there now and say, you know, what is your message? What do you want to achieve? How can we design an event for you to help you achieve your message? So it's really come around now where they're actually designing events for sponsors, and that's really a lot of what these guys are doing, you know, as music has sort of molded to sort of help suit some of these models. Now there are certain events like Paul's got with Squamish where there's a real mass that's building up. There's a lot of eyeballs and there's lots of value there. So there is a real value in it being associated with something that's bigger than just a one-off event for a brand. So it's really, there's a balance of two ideas, and I think you have to be able to sort of play both sides. It depends on what your needs are as the event producer. So if the event already exists and you need sponsorship to fund it, then what you have to do is find a reason for that sponsor to succeed at your event. So you got to give them a hook that says, okay, we want you to come because we're going to give you this attraction, this name, this reason. You're going to get to connect with eyeballs and talk to people, and this is how it's going to work for you. So you need to give them a hook, you need to give them a reason to say yes, and then you need to deliver what you promised, and then give them a rap report afterwards that says, this is what you got. And then get back to them quickly that says, and by the way, it's coming around again next year, so let's make it even better next year. So there are reasons to get in there, but it's no longer a case, I think, of, you know, saying, okay, what's Budweiser? Well, we're going to make the fence line's going to be a little bit of red, you know, and that's not enough anymore that you're going to make the fence red. You actually have to sell Bud. You got to have the Budweiser girls. You got to have a Budweiser promotion. You got to be online with Budweiser. You got to have a Facebook program for them. You got to connect with them in a bunch of different ways. You got to give them a whole list of reasons to say yes.
So now you're saying the process now is there is much more of a courtship element where you are contacting them and saying, I want to be the guy who does your executions. What do you guys want to do? And you try and...
I think sponsorship is just way harder to get these days.
Yeah, I think, I mean, the days of the sort of the wild spending of brands are long gone, and
They sure were fun.
Everything is now about measurable ROI and what's the marketing objective and are we achieving that, and the money is a lot tighter, and so it's a different landscape where you got to try and pry that money out of people. And I mean, this Celebration of Light is a good example. When we took that over in 2010, every year it was like, is this going to happen? Is it going to happen? And it was all that uncertainty that just fostered a sense of doubt in even the sponsors that were supporting it. Were like, well, should we be aligned with this anymore? Because frankly, we're not getting a lot out of it. A lot of it was philanthropic money that they weren't really realizing much in the way of corporate hospitality, or the whole program was a bit of a disaster. So we came in and we decided the first year that we're actually just going to announce that we're going to do it. We've got all the money in the world that we need, and we didn't. We lied. But what we did is we started to swing the thinking away from the uncertainty that had plagued it for years leading into that. Once the tobacco money went away, it was a jump ball every year. Is it happening? Is it not? So we just declared it. It's happening. We got all the money. We're good to go. And then we went about trying to raise $1.2 million, which is not easy. But we've also, in the last 4 years, swung the pendulum on that event now. We've got corporate hospitality, we've got chalets, we've got bleacher seats, we've got tons of brands coming down and activating, because it's now about a whole day of programming and interacting with consumers and brands and all this other stuff, not a 25-minute drunken fireworks thing at the end of the night.
So,
but it all speaks to what John was saying is you know, you've got to create compelling reasons for people to spend their marketing dollars with you, because they'll go somewhere else if you don't.
Because I think the brands, they're still wanting to spend the money. A lot of them still have the budget, but they don't just want to write a check to an event and then hope that their banner's up on a fence line and that's all they get was a banner on a fence line. I think they'd much rather have you walk into their office and say, okay, so what are your goals? You know, it's like Ken said about the strategy and understanding that every element of it is on strategy for that brand. So you get in there, you really have to listen to them first. You have to say, okay, what is it you want to accomplish with this brand launch? Okay, and what is your message and what is your target? And you ask more questions, you find out as much as you can. And then if you can get all that information, then you can figure out a way, okay, well, we can actually make this model work, because what we're going to do is give you a pre-program that's going to speak to this. We're going to give you an online social media program, and then your payoff is you get to come to our event with your own zone. So you have to do more than just say, okay, I want you to sponsor our event, you know, in order to get the check. Now you have to create this whole grassroots program and street marketing and have brand ambassadors and actually give them value for their buck. You know, at the end of the day, what they want is value, and they want to be able to prove it. And so now we just have to work harder to actually get the money. We can't just get the money put into the event. Now we have to actually get the money and create a program
Right. So
and execute the program.
the moral of the story, please.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, one of the things to remember with this kind of customization now is all of a sudden sponsorship isn't just revenue. There's a huge expense line associated with it. I think we used to do that, you know, if you sponsor, you'll get 2 tickets to this, you'll get your logo in a program, you'll get
To be on the poster.
your logo on the 3rd line of whatever, and those were all costs that you just kind of absorbed into everything. And I think now with this customization, you have to be really aware of the fact that, you know, if you're getting $30,000 from somebody, you're not generating $30,000 because the compelling reasons that the client wants cost a lot more money.
Well, an interesting thing on that is we will say to our clients, who are the major consumer product goods and services company, that if it's a $30,000 cost for the sponsorship, you need to be prepared to spend at least that on activation of your sponsorship. Because it's no longer enough to have a signage. Molson Indy, perfect example. People would pay that because they would want the TV coverage, or, you know, some signage, or some hospitality. But now they're saying, well, what's the ROI on that investment of $30,000? Because I can go spend $30,000 on something else, and they're going to compare that. This is going to be the touch points for that $30,000 or $130,000. So now we're saying to them, good sponsorship, you need to activate. So some of these great events, I mean, Virgin with you guys, you know, they're going to spend whatever it costs to be part of that event, and then they're going to have to activate the heck of it. It's their responsibility to bring that sponsorship to life. And I think the best events now, they'll say to consumer packaged goods companies specifically, what do you want to do with this event? Like, you're talking about asking those questions. It's like, it's no longer here's a gold, silver, bronze package you can buy. It's what is it that you want to accomplish, and we'll build it around. And then ask the tough question, what is your budget? And then often they'll tell you, yeah, I have $15,000, that's it. Okay, well, let's see what we can do with that for your, to hit your,
I think
your objectives.
the upside is that, you know, now that there's the media universe has changed, right? So now there's 500 channels when there used to be 3. So, you know, only 20 years ago, a brand could buy 3 networks and basically get everybody. And now they can't anymore, right? And now, so they buy the ads, you know, on television, and they're not getting the eyeballs they used to get, and they're not getting the penetration. They're realizing, well, we actually got more sales when we actually went to the event and talked to people and showed them, you know, our detergent, or gave them a sample, or actually interacted with them. And they're seeing, and it's the whole, your agency is actually built on that experiential, you know, experience of connecting the brand directly with the customer, and that happens at an event. So I think, you know, agencies like yours that have actually proven that over and over again is actually really helping save sponsorship at events. And it just means that as event producers, we have to create those environments and build it right into the event plan, that when people are walking in, well, here's, you know, the Colgate brush-up zone before you go into the site. You know, you create a little spot to actually sample Colgate before you get to the kissing booth, right? So
And that there's no opportunity to phone it in anymore. Is that now you have to be very cognizant of the fact that if you are interacting with people on an event site, you have to be rewarding them in some way, and that it isn't just, you know, here's a banner, here's a free sample. It's that you're talking about this like higher level of engagement.
There is nothing I hate more than going to an event and seeing a major brand, and all they're doing is just handing out stuff. You see these people, this staff, the promo staff, they're just, here, you want a free sample, want a free sample, want a free sample.
leaving the garbage.
Yeah, I mean, it's like they say, and I've got up to people, because I mystery shop them, like, oh, we just need to get rid of 1,000 of these samples a day. Do you want a box?
Yeah.
And it's like, oh my God. And one perfect example is I was at the Teleski and Snowboard Festival. I'd done work for Unilever for many years. They make Degree and Axe and those deodorants.
And own everything.
Yeah, well, yeah. P&G owns everything. They
Okay,
own,
fine.
They own a large
Fine.
part. And I went up to this booth. It was a Degree booth, and I'd worked in this brand. And no word of a lie, I said, hey, can I have a sample? And they said, sure. Do you want a box? And I said, yes, I want a box. And then what did I do? I got on the phone, I called the brand manager, and I said, you'll never believe what I just got. I just got a box of your product. Yeah. And, you know, the cost of that product is probably $1.50 per sample size. the cost of them being the sponsorship of that event, they never went back to sponsor that event because they knew, or they knew for the number of years anyway, that they would never get the value out of it because their brand was being polluted by that, just by this mass, no brand interaction, no value associated with what they were doing there. So that's the other thing about sponsorship now, and I talked about, you know, you need to spend to activate on that sponsorship. The events, the good events, know that they need to get some quality interaction too for their consumers and for the brands, because you want those clients, the big consumer packaged goods brands, to come back and do it again. And if they get an experience like they had from me, it's not going to happen.
I think another upside, though, is that you know, the events give them such good content, right? So the event has artists. It's got, you know, a destination. There's a value. A lot of times there's a ticket price or, you know, a VIP experience. So there's great content, and the brands now, they all are really, you know, the whole new world of social media and having Facebook pages. And so the brands are having Facebook pages, and the brands are tweeting. And they're all trying to find their own spot in the social media world. And so events can help really give them content that works. So there's another reason for brands to say yes if you can figure out how to add that social media element to what you're doing on the ground with your event. And that just helps create even bigger value. So
Nice. All right. I feel like did we cover that? Nice work.
We
You guys,
killed that one.
you guys still awake out there? You can hear a pin drop in here. You're so quiet. I have a question actually for you guys now. So how many of you guys want their job? Like, how many of you want to have a company like theirs where you get to do these amazing things? Does any? Yeah? And how many of you would just be happy working for one of these guys?
Yeah, owning
Nice.
it is not the same as producing big events.
Yeah.
Let's be very clear
Yeah.
about that. There is a huge difference.
One is, I believe, a little more life-shortening than the other. That is the. So, I don't know where to start now. I want to start with Paul. See, I feel like he's been quiet. How do people get to be you? How do they get you to retire and let them do it?
You give me a decent offer for the business. I'm
Nice. They just got to buy you out. They're going to show up with enough millions and just say.
You know, it goes back to what we started with, which is the perseverance piece. I mean, and that's not just me personally, but it's anybody that sort of rises into a higher level in this industry. Is, you know, I used to many years ago, before I got involved in running my own business, I was a TA at Douglas College when they first launched their stagecraft program.
Nice.
And we used to have students come in there, and they were 18 years old, and they wanted to be at the end game before they'd even got through the program.
Yeah. Didn't want to spend
And
the
you
time
were
in the
sort of
trenches.
like, you know what? You gotta invest the time. You gotta build relationships. You gotta build your skill set. You gotta stick it out.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's not unlike any other career. It's like if you bail after 2 years, well, you're not going to have got far. If you stick with it for 15 or 20 or 25, or, you know, I mean, we've all been doing this a long time, but
Yeah. Heck yeah.
you know, for whatever reason, we stuck with it, and you eventually get to that point where those relationships all start to pay off, and your credentials start to create more opportunities, and you sort of get that momentum going. So it really comes down to perseverance.
Right. So experience, showing up every day, putting the time in, building
Absolutely.
relationships.
Absolutely.
Nice. Did you guys get that? Everybody got that? Okay. You write that down? Should be twittering this stuff. Ken, I believe you were a fan of mentorship. Am I right there?
Okay.
You enjoy the okay?
I like it top down to me.
Sure.
I'm not so sure about the
Right,
rest of the
okay.
way down. Be honest.
How? And you can pass on this question too.
No, it's
How do
fine.
people get to learn from you? How do they reach out to you and get to learn from your knowledge base and your experience? What would be a good way for someone to do that?
Well, I think, one, you need to reach out to us. I think I made some decisions about our company during the recession, and we run a very small team, and we expand that team with experts and people when we need to. I'm not a big fan of overhead, so there is certainly lots of opportunity to intern or be a part of an event. specifically in terms of a greater role in that, it can be the same thing. It can come in the form of shadowing or whatever. I think in terms of where my mentoring is right now, it's probably more in leadership development as it relates to ISES, and that's just because I have a management team now at work that I never had for a long time.
Yeah.
So the corporate services people report to them, the producers and coordinators report to the event services people, so I'm not really responsible for that anymore,
Sure.
which
But
is a good thing, actually.
Nice. But it is, but you are approachable about these sort of things, where people could reach out to you and your company and say, hey, I want to be a part of this.
Absolutely. We take any phone calls or those 30-minute coffee conversations.
Yeah. Informational interview?
Yeah. I'm a big believer in you have to remember where you came from and give back. And I know for myself and my former business partner at E=MC², the very first TSE conference that we ever went to, we saw Andrea Michaels speak. And she walked up to us afterwards and she handed us every contract, every document that she had and said, I'm excited about you guys. I think you guys are going to do awesome. Take all of my stuff and put your own logo on it. And that probably saved us about a year or two's worth of grief and another 2 years of eating craft dinner only.
Nice.
And that was huge. So I do think it's important that we give back.
Excellent. And is that sort of a general consensus that it's like, just call us, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Nice.
Don't email. Just call.
Just
Yeah,
phone.
don't-
Yeah,
don't-
email's a funny thing.
And don't text, sorry.
How are we
You
doing?
can text me. I'm okay with that.
All right.
Okay.
We'll pass out your cell number at the end. How are we doing for time? Can I keep going? 7:45. And then so how much time do I have to? So I can go till 8 and then we open up to the audience? Is that right? Oh, all right. So how are you guys doing? Does anyone have questions? Has anybody been inspired to ask questions? Because I can keep really good. Okay, we got one. We got two. No, absolutely. We got three. Okay, so let's do this then. It's Q&A time. Good stuff. Would you like to go first? There's a mic set up right over there. So yeah, I'll say maximum 2 questions, and if you talk just trying to sound smart, I will make fun of you.
All right. Perhaps a little bit more directed at David and Ken. You're talking about how the events industry, well, actually all of you have talked about this. It's evolved more into customizing events to meet a company's marketing goals. And I have sort of an environmental question around that because David, you mentioned Unilever. They're Bullfrog Power's largest customer who buy green energy for all their Canadian operations. And I'm just curious if we've now got to the point in the events industry where things are customized to the level that they say, hey, we have these environmental goals over here, now that's going to trickle all the way down into product sampling, for example, at events, or how they are managing their environmental impact in terms of the experiential marketing and product activations. So probably mainly for you.
Yeah, so my answer to that would be, it was becoming really, really important up to 2008, 2009, and then the recession hit, and it became less important. So for Coca-Cola, for the Olympics, we did everything sustainable. Basically, we had to be carbon neutral. And it was the first time after we'd been talking about it for a number of years that Coke was like, yeah, that totally fits with what we're doing. I believe, as an environmentalist myself, I believe it's shifted back down a step or two behind where we were, because it's now about the fiscal challenges that are associated with a lot of these brands. I mean, Coke is a fantastic company, and they actually do a lot of that. You know, their plant bottle was huge. It was super expensive. Every uniform we made for our sampling team, for everything on the Olympics and the torch relay, was made from recycled Coke bottles. And I don't want to use Coke as an example because Coke still does that, but some of our other clients, it's not necessarily at the forefront of their discussion. So we're reminding them. And I think as agencies, we need to be talking about sustainability a little bit more. Often what sustainability means in the advertising world is let's just do something digitally, online. There's no footprint on that, as opposed to a physical interaction of doing an event. But you know, there's other great companies, specifically in Vancouver, and I'll name one of them, is a company called brand, that they will take products from our clients and from events, and they'll dispose of them environmentally. And I love them to death, and they both started Inventa. So
I mean, I think as event producers, we all have to do more, you know, in terms of being responsible for recycling and waste management. You know, it's still a huge thing, and events just generate huge amounts of waste, and we do need to try and take those extra steps to get that garbage sorted, and to try and, if you're having people sampling, to make sure that they're coming in without the plastic packaging, you know, and really to try and get more foresight into what we're bringing onto the property, and more having them refill the water bottles and things like that. So we really all have to look at that in every line, you know, every aspect of the event.
Yeah,
That's
hopefully it'll shift back again, but I completely agree. The recession did it in, and it was top of mind. We used to do environmental sustainability briefs with every proposal that we did in that, and they're just not looking for that now. But I think it's the entire industry that needs to work on this. We need to have event partners or suppliers that can find the stuff for us, and we need to educate our clients. It's not cheap. It's not inexpensive. For some reason, and I don't know if everyone else has this experience, they're fine with the food. They'll go organic, they'll go locavore, they're fine with that stuff. It's all the other things that is just not top of mind for them.
well, yeah, the problem that I'm seeing is it's New York, or it's some financial part of the company that says, okay, here's your budget, and you can get this environmentally friendly product as a premium or a part of what we're doing, and it'll take longer and it'll cost you 40% more. And they'll just say, no, we need to be budget conscious. Like, leading up to 2010, it was top 3 of the objectives in so many of our programs. It would unfortunately probably be bottom 2 or 3 now. And they have to be really a core of what their company means. And Coke still does that well, but I wouldn't say that's true for everyone. We can do a better job.
And sometimes it's hard to find that information. Like, you might be planning an event with a group responsible for that on one side of the corporation, and you might have to do a little bit of digging and find out that the community investment program actually has an initiative around the environment and that, and you could sometimes rob Peter to pay Paul.
You know, when you were talking earlier today, I said, oh my God, I got to talk to her, because I've got something that we haven't even talked about with one of our clients that we really should. So we'll talk after.
So that was a fantastic question. Thank you. So it's cost. It's just at this point, being environmentally conscious is cost prohibitive with the majority of. Well, hold on. I'm going to bring you into this. I'm winding up. I'm so winding up to drag you into this. So just hang on a second. So if you guys find that it is it's cost prohibitive, and that there is a general reflex that comes out of the clients where now they'll be like, yeah, let's not do that because that's probably going to cost us more money.
I'll go one step further, slightly abrasive, but some people just don't care.
Yeah.
We, and I get that in this market, in Vancouver, that's very important. It's not important in Toronto.
Yeah.
It's not important in Calgary. It's clearly not important in Calgary. It's important in San Francisco. It's important in Seattle. It's important in Vancouver.
Yeah.
It's not important anywhere else. It's right now. It's not. There's just an apathy towards it, and that is a huge thing too, because the challenge is before you can even have the conversation with them about the financial ramifications, you actually have to get them to care. And that's not our job. I truly believe that. There is a huge industry out there. It's our job to deliver it. It's our job to teach the clients and explain it to it. I believe it is not my job to educate the world about the environment. That is that's a whole other industry.
I liked what Tom wrote in his little blurb when he explained Loungeworks and the sensibility he's bringing just to his business with his rental product and how he maintains it. And I think that's, I noted that, and I thought, that's a really good example of we really need to do more just as responsible individuals and business owners and operators and surviving here. So I'm interested to hear what you are going to do at Squamish and how you're going to manage that.
So you put them on the hot seat.
Well, it's a monster.
It's a hot topic,
It's a
and
monster
it's a hot topic for a lot of reasons. But I mean, garbage is a visible, it's a visible.
Those 30-yard containers are ugly things.
Well,
Doesn't matter how much
you know
fencing you
what?
put around them.
It's like traffic. It's like when you bring those sorts of numbers of people together, there's inevitable byproducts of that. We see it every year with Celebration of Light. We see it with Squamish, and last year in particular, we got caught with a realization. It's like, hey, wait a minute, this thing's growing, and our systems haven't grown with it. Yeah. So a lot of it, I think, is about as event producers, and I'm in a slightly different space than these guys because we're not so much working with the brands. We're the guardians of the event. So we're the ones that get hauled up in front of the council, in front of the pitchfork mobs that are angry because we had
too much
garbage, Coke cans on the field the day after the event or something. But I mean, it comes down to trying to lead. The learning of the patrons. It's as much as we're talking to the sponsors and the vendors about what stuff they're bringing on site or what they're handing out or how they're managing their own waste at the end of the day. It's about trying to get proactive and common sense messaging to the consumers to be, to just start to shift thinking. It's like the City of Vancouver with the zero waste program, and it's a lot of that stuff still ends up in the landfill, but you're slowly but surely introducing people to the idea that they can make some thoughtful choices.
And you would think that, especially, I think it would be easier out here than anywhere, if you, with a small amount of signage that incorporated just the tiniest bit of guilt, that it would really motivate people to go yeah, it's plastic,
Well, what we found, and again, Celebration of Light is the most glaring example, just because of the sheer volume of people that we deal with. But basically, it's all pretty good until it gets dark, and then nobody gives a shit anymore because they get up at the end of it and they walk away and they don't have to see it.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate.
That is us as a species summed up, and I don't have to see it.
So it's you got to shift the needle slowly, and I think it's. There's a lot of messaging and a lot of sort of groundswell around events to be leaving a smaller footprint, and it's just going to take time to get people all on board.
The good news is that there are advocates out there, like Ginny, for example. And so for those of you who do have questions about how to make your events greener, she is absolutely the girl to talk to.
It is possible. The one event that we do that I'm always amazed is we do the Fusion Festival, and you get 10,000 people in front of the stage, but when they all leave and the night ends, we look out in the field and there's no garbage. They didn't leave a mess. It's like we get this incredible, the community coming together, and they do look after it, and they do look after the garbage. So I think it actually is possible. Now we do Canada Day in Surrey, and it's the opposite. You walk away, and it's the same thing happened. It got dark, and people partied, and there's a big mess. But the Fusion is always really inspiring to me when we look at it and see how little garbage there is on the field, and that's because the people put it in the garbage and they cared about it. So there's hope.
Is there something specifically different that you guys do at Fusion?
I think just more garbage cans and more garbage containers and banned recycling
you just
stations.
make it easier for them.
And you try and make it easy for them. You got places for them to do it, good signage, and I think they just at that event they care.
Yeah.
They
well,
really
Holland
care.
Park is certainly a prettier venue. There is. Than Cloverdale. We've got other questions, and I would love to get to them. Heather Baker,
that would be your future president.
David, I'm really interested in the Olympic torch and Coke and the activation, and maybe you can talk a little bit about how all that came about, because it was an enormous event, coast to coast, and so many touch points that I find it just absolutely fascinating.
Yeah, that was, it was by far the most amazing thing that we've done, and probably that arguably I'll ever do unless the Olympics come back. So we did two parts of the Olympics. We had the sponsor side that we brought to life, the consumer experiences for Coca-Cola, BCLC. So we were working with you in Surrey and worked with Paul and his team around the live site. But then we also worked for VANOC doing the celebrations themselves. So we put on 186 shows over 106 days. So we had 2 stages that would travel, and we do 2 shows almost every day. You could do the math. It wasn't quite 2 every day, but 2 on average every day. It was time. We had a year and a half to plan for it. We didn't have the budget we wanted. We had to be nimble and flexible and really figure out how to do it lean. It was an amazing logistical challenge that we had to have a lot of partners. We had to have a lot of people that knew the routes were well laid out. For 2 years, they worked on the routes. So we didn't necessarily have to find where we were going to go. They told us where we were going to go for those 186 shows. So that's fine. All we had to do is get the crew and the team, which was the crew for each stage was about 20 people per team, and 2 major semi-trucks and then about 4 other vehicles for each team. So they would kind of piggyback off each other in morning show, evening show. But it really had a lot of time to do it. And it was one of those things that no was not an option. You couldn't not light that cauldron every day. And I remember distinctly there was this one time in Channel Port aux Basques in Newfoundland. We were taking the ferry over to PEI or Nova Scotia the next day. And it was a torrential storm. And because our trucks had to get on the ferry, we couldn't bring our stage. So the community set up this fun little stage, and it was cute, and it had tarps on it, and it was, Channel Port aux Basques, 40,000 people maybe. And there was such a storm that everything shorted out. Lightning, thunder, like the whole stage just blew. And we were like, what on earth is going on? What are we going to do? Well, you can't not have that stage. So we were really nimble, and we said, where the heck can you light a flame that's going to go, 6 feet potentially in the air? And I went with the team and said, go find somewhere. We have 2 hours before the team, and we're all scrambling around. And I'm like, that's a fire hall. Let's go talk to the fire chief. If anybody knows where you can light a flame like that. I said, okay, listen, you got high ceilings, you got trucks, you're the fire department, everything goes wrong. He's like, I said, so what do you think about pulling out those trucks and we'll do it in here? He's like, yeah, let's do that.
Nice.
And pulled out the trucks, went in there, and the show must go on. But it's
awesome.
about being totally prepared and having backup plan. We didn't have a backup plan for that, but having the mentality of backup plans and knowing that we're still going to have to do this no matter what the next day and the next 4 hours. We're going to have to do it in another city. So preparation was key for that. And working with people that can be flexible. If they're just like, no, this is the only way to do it, here's the box, we would have never been able to succeed. Going coast to coast to coast, because we went to the north too. So, yeah.
Nice.
Hope that answers your question.
That is fantastic.
Yeah, I don't miss Sochi though. When we every time that the torch went out, we had a mother flame and 2 daughter flames, and that was meaning from the actual flame that they lit in Athens before the game, through the sun in this big bowl, the flame traveled on a plane, like seats in a plane, the special lockdown things. So in Russia, they lit it with a Zippo. Like, it's total everything against it. Yeah, there's video on it. You're just like, oh, the torch went up. Here, let's light that sucker up. We would have to stop the entire torch relay, get the daughter flame, which is in a support truck, bring it over, an inner lantern. The lantern was lit by a piece of wood, and then you light it again. Like, it was, what they're having to deal with in Russia, poor guys. And a lot of my teams that worked with us is still over there, so I don't miss it. It was, I love it.
Nice.
I do miss it, but I don't.
Excellent. Thank you. So I think there was one more. Do we have time for one more question? One more. There was one other hand. I saw a third hand.
Yeah.
Heather Sharp.
Hello. A big part of what we do, both from a supplier, event planner, and certainly at your level, is sell ourselves. And my question for you is, how do you overcome the challenge of your value proposition of selling what you do and its value to your potential clients?
How do you sell yourself?
Can we get that? Can you give us that one more time?
How do you justify what you do and what it costs? How's that for a shorthand?
How do you justify the markup and the agency fee that is charged by the event companies? I think
Excellent
is
paraphrase,
the question.
thanks.
How do you justify what you're worth?
Hello, me.
Yeah, this is super
Well-
Ken.
First thing that you always have to be clear about, value and price are not collapsible. So they're two completely different conversations. The value that you bring to the table is not the same as proper budgeting, being able to negotiate, financial investment in that. I'm not going to speak about markups because everybody knows how I feel about those. So I think, again, and this really came out of the recession, is for a lot of us, we're all equal on the playing field. A lot of us, if given the same opportunity, given the same kind of event, we would be able to do the event. So relationship part aside, I think it's understanding what the client is going through in their own sort of circumstance, their own, and we'll just use corporate as an example. You know, when the recession happened, we had a whole bunch of those people that up to now had just been, you know, does it look pretty? Does it look great? And, you know, the ROI component was always lip service at best. You know, how do you know you got a great event? Everyone smiled at the end. And then when the recession happened, the senior execs were looking at ways to quantify that stuff. But in many ways, the stakeholders that we were working with either couldn't communicate in that languaging up, or they couldn't communicate the fun, exciting part the other way. They were stuck in this place because they had never had to work in both realms. And that was something that we embraced really quickly, is being able to deliver things to them that were still very emotionally written and emotionally based from the creative standpoint, but also give them the tools, things like communication plans, things like explanations around their financial investment, which is a very different context for a conversation versus a budget. So that's what we did.
Is that, do you feel that that's answered your question?
Somewhat.
Okay.
Maybe,
Well, that's okay. I'm just
This-
the first one.
This is, I mean, this is a tough question to answer.
I think you have to you have to prove your worth. You can't just tell somebody, you have to prove it. You have to, by things you've done in the past, by comparisons with other shows, looking at this is what the cost of this other show is, using sort of industry standards to establish your fees, being transparent in your fees and transparent in your billings, I think helps really build trust that can, you know, extend beyond the expiration date of that particular event. So, I mean, when you're landing a new client, you have to get them to take that leap of faith. You know, there is a leap of faith required on both parts that we're going to come together to do this. And so you have to get them to believe in what you're doing. So you have to believe it first. You know, believe in yourself, believe in the idea, get them to believe in the idea, and then find the common ground that works.
So we have expectation management is rolled in there. We have salesmanship is rolled in there. We have bring your credibility as well is baked into that. And being straightforward and honest, I think, is what we pretty much covered there. And I think that those are all good pieces of advice.
I think something else that's worked well for us is stand behind your budget. And so if you're creating a budget, I've said thousands of times to client, we're going to present you a budget that we think is realistic for your objectives if you briefed us properly. And we will not go over that budget unless you change the scope. Because if we've made an error in budgeting for that, that's our error and you shouldn't pay for it. And that's done very well for us. I mean, that's the integrity of what we have created. So I always go back to integrity. But if you can't create an accurate budget, the client should not pay for your mistakes. So we stand behind it and we make sure we get it right. And there was a lot of mistakes in the early days, but then you learn it and you say, you know, I know that if you stay within the boundaries of what you've set out and what we've agreed upon, this is going to be the budget. You're not going to get another invoice from us unless you change the scope. and they love it because they know for certainty.
The only challenge being in the event industry, you wait 10 minutes and something changes.
That's why you need this
because
change
there's so
order
many
forms.
people.
Your world's a little different.
You know, it's, yeah, you know, if you've got the, you know, a singular focus of a specific project you're going to do and you know it's going to be the same 3 people over and over, then that is, you know, you can stand behind that. But when you're into an environment where there's 200 people involved, each with their own agendas and their own needs, all trying to shift to get what they want, that's why there's so many changes, because there's so many people involved.
I believe you're describing Snow Jam. That is.
Any event.
Yeah.
I think most of us are afraid about having those financial conversations, and you just have to own them. I think, you know, if something does change in the scope of the event, then, you know, we're afraid to bring up a budget change order to the client and get them to sign off, and you'll only let that happen once until you get burned. We also need to be careful not to allow ourselves to be commoditized. We have value, and most of us not only bring production value to the table, but also creative value. And, you know, if clients are trying to grind you on what your fee is, and you do feel comfortable about maybe reducing your fee because it's a piece of business that you want, then don't just reduce your fee, because what you're doing is you're training them that you are not worth what you originally established. Perhaps it's sponsorship, and then you need to list something in the financial investment that says, this is actually what I'm worth, but, you know, I'm going to come on board as a sponsor in that. So Andrea Michaels was one of my mentors, and when the recession was happening, she told me a story, and I use this all the time for my team. And she was pitching to a client, and they needed the business. And going into the meeting, her team said, you talk creative, we'll talk dollars, because they know that Andrea's pretty, you know, unbending when it comes to the dollars. She's been instrumental in teaching us all that we're allowed to make a living at this job. So she was presenting to the client, and when it was finished, the client said, you realize you're the most expensive? And she didn't answer. And he said, well, and she said, oh, I thought that was a statement, not a question. And then in further conversation, she talked to him about the difference, or if he had the choice, what kind of car would he drive? Would he drive a BMW? Would he drive this kind of car? And it all came down to quality, reliability, proven track record in the marketplace, results, all of those kind of things. And it's much easier to justify what you're worth if you can explain all those kind of things. But Canadians in general, we don't usually toot our own horn. And it goes the same for business. Sometimes we find it difficult to say this is what we're worth.
We're also terribly conflict averse too, where it's like,
Sorry?
we avoid conflict at almost any cost, including to our own person, like where we would rather suck it up on the lower, crappier rate than actually say like, hey, actually, you know what? No, this is how much we charge for things. But I think the point about the change order is really valid. Unfortunately, I think we're out of time. So I have to wrap this up, but I really feel like I could do this for another hour. So I'm just going to give you an open invitation that I would love to have any or all of you on ISES Hangout sometime. So hopefully we can make that happen in the future. And then we can do it from the comfort of our own home, not with all these people staring at us. Except they'll be staring at us. We just won't know. So I want to, so this is where I have to wrap up. And I want to thank you gentlemen so much for joining me. This was a real treat and a real pleasure. And I'm positive that everyone here really enjoyed having the experience of your wisdom.
Thanks.